of the gospel that every single person needs and that can revolutionize this world. In this world, there will be trouble, we're told, but we take heart because Jesus has overcome this world. He has plans, as the prophet Jeremiah wrote, to prosper us and not to harm us, to give us hope and a future. He promises, as the book of Revelation states, a time when there will be no more crying and no more pain and even no more death. The day is coming when the revolution against the forces of evil in this world will be absolutely complete. But that day, it's just not here yet. And we still yet walk by faith and not by sight. And this is where you and I come in. After Jesus surprised that crowd, gave them the unexpected by sharing his word instead of wielding the sword and taking out their enemies, the disciples come to Jesus with the same inadequate spirit that so often fills our minds and our hearts. It's getting late, they say to Jesus. Send these people away so they can go and get something to eat. And that's where the revolution that Jesus leads really goes against the grain. He says, you give them something to eat. Us, the disciples question. How in the world can we give them something to eat? We only have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And in that exchange, we learn something that should absolutely change everything about the way we live our lives. And it should change everything about our church. It's the way to changing the culture that has so arrogantly tried to change God's design. What you see here is that Jesus takes unqualified, uneducated people and he says, you're it. He takes fearful, doubting, and anxious people and says, go, feed my sheep. He comes across sinful, shallow people like you and me, and he says, you're all I've got. Go and revolutionize. Go and change this world. And so often, our thoughts, our initial thoughts at least, are the same as those disciples, but we don't have enough to do the job. It's so easy to get bogged down on all the things that are hard, or all the things that are wrong, and then just be paralyzed for carrying out our whole purpose for being in the first place, in church. I so often hear the phrase, well, we need to get our house in order before we do this or before we do that. And to be fair, I understand oftentimes what people mean when they say that, and I don't even necessarily disagree if you share that in the right context. But here are some other facts. Our house, it's never going to be in order like we think it should. There are always going to be problems. There's never going to seem to be enough money. There will always be some level of conflict. No matter how hard we try, there will never be an absence of doubt in the hearts of some, and some will always reject our message. No matter how sincere we are, and no matter how much we even try to sugarcoat it for them. Some members will never get involved in the ministry, no matter how easy we make it for them to do so. You can call everything I've just said pessimism, but the Bible calls it sin. Simply put, because of who we are, as imperfect, fragile, frail people, we go through life feeling like we just have 5 loaves and 2 fish when there's this crowd of 5,000 just seeking to knock down our door. But here's the shocker, at least according to our blurred vision. Well, this story is telling us is our house is never going to be in order like we think it should. Those things are not only to be expected, but the difficulties we endure are the prerequisites for a successful revolution. You see, brokenness and contempt and evil are the very conditions in which the revolution takes place. A whole community is hungry out there, maybe hungry for food, but certainly hungry for meaning and for salvation. And Jesus says to us today, shortcomings and all, go and give them something to eat. And until you see that the task, if left up to just us, is impossible, then we remain completely unqualified to do it. But do you get what happened in this story of Jesus feeding the 5,000? Jesus performs the miracle to feed the people, but don't miss how he did it. He didn't just wave his hands and say, voila, eat, like I suppose he could have done. He used the food that the disciples already had. He used the gifts that the people already possessed, inadequate as they were. And it wasn't until the disciples started going